What's up, sports bettors? We went 2 for 2 on Underdog Fantasy yesterday, but we also had a couple pushes, so I guess not technically 2 for 2. But what I'm going to be sharing with you today is 3 really good plays. Okay? So a lot of people, they ask, why is this a fantasy site? Why isn't this a sports book? And what you'll notice is there's no odds on this site. There's probably like 10,000 lines, but there's no odds. So the way this platform works is every 3-leg parlay you create, it doesn't matter if you take overs, unders, it doesn't even matter what 3 picks you select. You're going to be betting 1 to win 6. Okay? So basically, this is just a 3-leg parlay where I'm betting 1 to win 6. Right? So if you looked at a sports book and every leg in your parlay was at minus 122 odds, your parlay would be betting 1 to win 6. So long story short, we have a bunch of videos about the math, the strategy behind Underdog Fantasy. But long story short, they're setting their lines at the implied price of minus 122. So even though this isn't like a sports book where you go to it and you're like, oh, I'm getting minus 110, you should assume for any 3-pick entry you take, or 5-pick entry, so 3-pick and 5-pick entries are at minus 122 implied odds, 2-pick entries are at minus 137, which is why you'll notice I almost never place 2-pick entries on Underdog Fantasy. 3-pick, 3-pick, 3-pick. Almost always 3-pick. You don't want to go with 2 picks. I'm trying to save you money, right? And the reason is because you're getting a lot worse implied odds for 2-pick entries as we've gone through. So basically, what's the strategy for actually making money off Underdog Fantasy? It's to look for value at minus 122 odds at the end of the day. And that ultimately boils down to looking on OddsJam for plays that have an edge, right? This percent column is also known as edge. So I typically filter to see the highest profit margin plays first. But you can see here, Kevin Herter over 2.5 threes, bet in bold with a circle around it. That play has an edge. Same with Gabe Davis, under 3.5 receptions, right? In the same way an investor, a day trader, cares a lot about the price that they're getting, it's no different in sports betting. If you actually want to make money, you need to look for value at minus 122, right? The people making money off Underdog Fantasy, they understand how this platform works inside and out. They understand the implied odds, and they understand how to search for value, right? That's how you make money. The way you're making money off Underdog isn't knowing sports. People who think knowing sports means you make money sports betting, it's the craziest, dumbest thing in the world. Literally the dumbest thing in the world. So why do we like Gabe Davis? Let's start there. Gabe Davis under 3.5 receptions, right? So these 3 are fantasy sites. Monkey Knife Fight, PrizePicks, Underdog Fantasy. They all think they're really clever because they're not technically sports books, but we know their implied odds for 2-pick entries are minus 137, and on Underdog for 5 or 3-pick entries, their implied price is minus 122. So what we want to do is ruthlessly scan the market and look for value at minus 122, So this is the first play we're going with. Gabe Davis under 3.5 receptions. You have Caesars and FanDuel both setting this at minus 160, minus 166. DraftKings a little less aggressive on the under. They only have this at minus 145. Bet Online, a very sharp offshore sportsbook, minus 156. Bovada, another offshore sportsbook, minus 190. Pinnacle, sharpest bookmaker in the world, minus 191. Right? So this EV tool, it's free to browse odds on OddsJam, but all this positive EV tool does is it updates, kind of millions of odds throughout the market in real time to point out these spots with value. It's pretty simple, right? It just takes all these odds and shows you where you're actually getting value on Underdog Fantasy. There's no BS. Pretty simple. So here, it's showing us this play because every sportsbook has the under heavily juiced, which means the under is a lot more likely to occur. Pinnacle, sharpest bookmaker in the world, they have this at minus 191. We're getting minus 122. Absolutely ridiculous. 4.68% profit margin on this play. You guys got to be all over this on Underdog Fantasy. So that's the first one I locked in. And I say this all the time, but it applies to sports betting too. And I put my own money on all this stuff. So here's a bet I just locked in. Wyoming, Santa Clara over 135 points. I bet it at minus 110 on WinBet. You can see Pinnacle, sharpest bookmaker, has this at minus 124. Barstool, 3 other books minus 122, DraftKings minus 140. But then if you click into the odds, what you're going to notice is, hey, you know, most sports books, even if they're not setting an alternate line at 135, you can see Bet Online, a really sharp offshore sports book, they actually have the over 136 half juiced towards the over, whereas Pinnacle has the under juiced. So I'm using all this data in the market. DraftKings has their line at 136 half, as well as FanDuel. So I'm using all this data in the market to kind of tease out that, like, wow, being able to get this at over 135 as opposed to 136 half, which is where the rest of the market is clearly a play with an edge, clearly a play with value. We found an edge. And my goal as a sharp bettor, is you can see we now have automatic syncing for a bet tracker, at least to some sports books. It doesn't work for every sports book. But what's really useful about this is, I use, and every sharp sports bettor, every OddsJam user knows this, is you never know where the best bets are going to occur. We're going through a play on underdog. We just hit a play on WinBet, which is right here, right? Is like, there are going to be losing streaks, there are going to be winning streaks, and also you don't know which platform is going to have the best bets, who's going to have the value that day, right? Like, here's a great play on WinBet where they're asleep at the wheel 1.5 points lower than the rest of the market, and we're able to get the over 135. But, here are some plays on FanDuel. Here's a play on Caesars, right? Yada, yada, yada. So long story short, here is a play on Underdog Fantasy we went through earlier. So long story short, especially if you're using a lot of sports books, you need more sports books because all these bookmakers have different odds and you never know where the opportunity is going to be. Currently, the top bet is on Underdog Fantasy. If I had Ballybet, maybe the top bet would be on Ballybet, and maybe I missed out on an incredible opportunity, right? So this is the first play I went with. Next, same strategy, different sport, doesn't frickin' matter. Drew over 1.5 threes. Look at this. Every sports book, it's sure slightly lower profit margin, but look at this. No other book giving us better than minus 125 sure on BetUS. Right, there's always, since sportsbooks set lines independently, there will always be disagreements from book to book. But you can see Pinnacle, sharpest bookmaker, they have this minus 171. DraftKings, minus 140. FanDuel, minus 146. Caesars, minus 169. So looking at all the data in the market, it's like, yeah, we're clearly getting enough value to beat that minus 122 juice. And we have a bunch of videos about how to back out the profit margin of your play. But that's what we're looking for, right? Like, we know we're going to have losing streaks, hot streaks, losing streaks as a sharp bettor. I showed this, and I will show it in other videos. You can follow me. There's a new popular bet tracker. I don't work for it. It's called Pickit. It's a verifiable bet tracker, but it's useful to see, so you can follow my plays, essentially. Like, it'll sync every 20 minutes or so and show you what I bet. But it's useful to see, like, the ups and downs, right? You can see that in my OddsJam bet tracker I'll show, and also this is like, when you have an edge, we're still going to go on losing streaks, we're still going to go on winning streaks. It's all about earning that long-term ROI. Here, the ROI of this play is 2%. The ROI of this play is 4.6%. So our Underdog Fantasy entries, the ROI is typically like 7%, right? But that's, you got to place enough bets. Your sample size has to be large enough, right? So this is the next play I went with. All the sportsbooks have the over heavily juiced, and then we have that play on Kevin Huerter. Again, lower profit margin. Another thing I recommend that you can do, so you can see my play right here, I demolished it. So another thing I recommend that some people have success with is you can use this screen, because what the screen allows you to do is, like, process a lot of information in a short amount of time, right? So I typically go to, like, player shots on goal, and I can browse, scan the market pretty quickly for discrepancies between, like, PrizePicks and Underdog. So you can see here, it's like, oh, this guy, he's at an OU of 3 shots on goal, right? Whereas these other books are, whereas PrizePicks was, where is it? PrizePicks was at 2.5. So that's kind of an example of how you can use this screen ultimately to your advantage. So hopefully this was helpful. and let's make some money.